This is Akudo, let the truth be told. I got vibes of grace, lighting up the dark.
It's a great question. So I think the number one shift for a small business person, and I learned this from Dan, and you're an accolade of Dan, has to be that you're not the doer of the business, but you're the marketer of the business. He goes, it's counterintuitive, but OneStar Reviews drive more sales to the business than 5-star reviews.
What?
I know, right? It's counterintuitive. But he said you get more clicks and more people buying from your 1-star reviews than you do from your 5-star. It is.
It's the only game that I know that you never retire from.
You don't.
Never. And I remember reading the book, The Business Secrets from the Bible by Rabbi
Sure, I love
Daniel Lamp.
Yeah,
You know,
I
right?
love it. I've heard him speak. Fail fast, right? Fail forward. So you're going to go fast. You're going to make some mistakes, and you have to realize that. You're going to go fast, and your staff's going to make some mistakes, and you have to realize that.
Are you stuck with slow banks and no funding? Waiting weeks for a loan can sink your business. At Monify, we deliver MCF funding fast, up to $25 million in just 24 to 72 hours. A simple application, lightning fast approval, and money in your bank ASAP. Get back to growing and not waiting. Call Monify LLC today and get funded tomorrow. Texas businesses trust Monify. Will you? Don't wait, because funds go fast. So apply now at www.monify.com or call 1-800-608-0490. Monify, wealth born of character.
All right, guys, we're back again for a special. My name is Great Akudo, and I have a special guest, special. I always bring you the most special people, and this gentleman has too much accolades. It's dripping. You know, he's the freaking man. I'm just saying. But you guys will see for yourselves, right? But I have a guest. His name is Nicholas Loise, and I'm going to give you a little bit of who this man is, right? He's the founder of Sales Performance Team. He's a salesman himself, sales leader, successful entrepreneur, marketing and sales executive, President's Club winner, speaker, and author. His mission is focused on helping small to mid-sized businesses. And I know most of my audience are small to mid-sized as well. He helps them improve their marketing and sales processes. You know, there's a difference between marketing and sales, right? This is someone that knows both. He helps them improve their marketing and sales processes, systems, and playbooks. While others talk about this, Nick has done it, okay? Continues to do it and works on creating processes and systems so that others can replicate in their own businesses, right? He's an author, creator of the educational course called Sales Mastery. How to create a high-impact sales team, no BS guide to direct response marketing and sales needle, and ghost writer to magnetic marketing. He was the co-presenter of the sales boot camps and marketing boot camps, which focus on helping small to mid-sized businesses sell and market better. As a keynote speaker, Nick has shared the stage with, I know you guys know Dan Kennedy. If you don't know Dan Kennedy, you know Russell Branson. If you don't know Russell Branson, you know Frank Kern. So we're not talking about small ballers right here, right? You know Joe Polish, Barbara Corcoran, Adam West, and many, many others, right? He has also been an adjunct professor of marketing. Now, this one is interesting to me, a professor of marketing at North Park University in Chicago and the Computer Science Institute. Wow, computer science. I did computer science in school. That's interesting. He created Sales Performance Team after working in a private equity-backed company, GKIC Magnetic Marketing, where he noticed a huge need in the markets to help business owners with sales and managing their sales teams, which is something that is one thing to have a sales team, but if you don't know how to manage it, I mean, what's the point? You know what I mean?
Right.
So Nick brings the passion for sales, marketing, small businesses, and entrepreneurship to his work every single day. So without any further ado, wherever you are, start making that drum beat sounds for me as we welcome to the pod, Nicholas Loise. Thank you, Nicholas, for joining us today. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you. First off, what a great introduction. I got embarrassed. I think my mom wrote that. You know, it's like, oh my gosh. And as I said to you in the pregame, right, and we got to know each other, I've spent a lot of time listening to your podcast. I mean, you bring great guests, you bring great information. And I think in this day and age, there's a lot of fluff out there. There's a lot of people kind of pretending, but you bring the real thing. You bring it. You bring the A game, and you throw fastballs right down the middle, to use like a sports metaphor too. So thank you for all you do. Like you, I have a passion for small, mid-sized businesses, right? And we could define that in any different ways. And I want to help, and I think you do too. And you're a classy guest. You're a classy host.
Yes, sir.
And your guests have been so classy, and I learned, like the ones I listened to, I've learned a lot. So it's great to be on here and part of an esteemed alumni. The great Kudo, we're going to get coats, we're going to get hats.
Yes, sir.
And we're gonna form something.
That's a good point. I'll definitely take note of that. Hats and shirts, man. For real. Thank you for that, sir. You see, you're already selling it into me now.
Well, you got to
show you how good you are with this thing.
You got it. You always got to be selling.
Man, that's true too. That's true too. So I'm gonna start with asking you this, and then we go into your element. What is your relationship with Jesus and faith, and how has it actually impacted your life, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. So I appreciate that. I always like to talk about it. I think we could talk a lot about it in business. And just as humans. So, I've I was born Catholic, right? And raised Catholic. And, I joked that I probably, as a firstborn Italian, thought I'd be a priest, right? Until I read the definition of celibacy, right? Then I knew I wasn't going to be that. Been active. Currently, my wife and I are very active in the Lutheran faith, right? So when we got married, she was Lutheran. And so we raised the family that. Very, very, very active in it. I speak to him every day. I think it's important to. I think it's important to probably speak to him more than that I do, right? You can never have a strong enough conversation with God, but I try to have a couple every day. Read the good book every day. I believe in evangelism, and I think one of the best sales books ever written, and your audience should look it up, is called The Master Plan of Evangelism, right? Wow. And it's how to go out. And I learned this from Guy Kawasaki, right? So it's not for me. He mentioned the book, and he was the first business development person for Apple. And it's really about how to go out and how to go out and evangelize your product, evangelize your service, but also it's about evangelizing God in Christ. But it's really a case study about how to create discipleship and followers. So I think the correlations between business and spirituality are huge. I think so many people get so much, I must say, satisfaction, but identity from their jobs or from their business. And I think that you need that, but you can't be one dimensional, right? So you also need this spiritual side and the family side, right? And all that. So I was very blessed early on, to have a strong faith and grew up in a Catholic family, right? So it's still to this day, very, very lucky. And, we try to be in the pews every Sunday. Summertime is a little more difficult because we're at the lake house, but I'm so impressed by like the work that all do, right? Catholic Charities and Catholic churches and Lutheran charities and Lutheran services and so many others. And it seems like there's a common element I do find with a lot of really great entrepreneurs and small business owners, is that they have a strong faith, right? And give them a little opportunity to talk about it, and they just love talking about it. And I think it's, if you think about who does good in this world, we all do, right? But usually, business owners give back so much more than they get credit for in this day and age. And I think different religious groups give back so much more than they get credit for in this day and age. So you can never kind of sing their praise enough.
Man, that's a good one, sir. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the honesty and the way you broke it down. So now let's get into this.
Okay.
Who is Nick? What is Nick like? Are you married, Nick?
Yeah.
In case some girls are looking at you through the screen and like,
oh, you're too
kind. Very good man. This is a good looking man, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Ladies, I'm taken, right? So let's stop that. I'm taken. I've been married for 30 years. Been blessed. Married up, right? Married a phenomenal woman. Vicky is her name. And we've been together for 35 years, right? So we've been around for a long time. And
Wow.
thank you. Yeah, I mean,
That's not easy.
that's yeomans. And that's the best decision I've ever made,
Oh,
beyond a shadow of a doubt. Two children, 27 and 24, and they are productive citizens, right? Almost
yes,
off the
sir.
payroll completely, which is great. You know, and doing well. I'm very proud of them. And I think that's your role, right? As a parent,
Yes.
when you could see the children just evolve and you want them to do
Yes.
better than you do.
Yes. Yes.
So they're there. They're on that path. And so impressed with my son and all he's doing in the business world. And so
Oh,
impressed with my
man.
daughter and all she's
Amazing.
doing in the business world. So it's been fun to watch them. It hasn't always been sunshine and roses, right? So I don't want
Of
to
course
give,
not.
I don't want to give that. But no, it's been great. We've been married, live in the same community that I grew up in, right? So kind of a cliche. It's kind of a community that multi-generations come back to. We're in this
Oh,
suburbs of
wow.
Chicago, and my mom and dad are, you know, a couple blocks away from us. So we see them. My
Oh,
sister and her family are in Wisconsin, and my brother and his wife are in North Carolina. But before that, they lived in Chicago. So we're around.
what
We're
about
big
wifey's
on.
children? Not children. Her family. Are they in Chicago as well?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they
Oh,
are in the
wow.
suburbs of Chicago also. Like Father's Day, we're all together. We played golf, right? We're trying to do more of those family outings. And
Yes.
so, you know, it's very important. I think it's grounded. We're blessed that we have a second family home on a lake in
Yes,
Michigan, right?
sir.
So for
Yes,
July
sir.
4th weekend, we'll have everybody up there. It'll be
Amazing.
chaos and it'll be wonderful and
Yeah.
it'll be everything, right? And
Yes,
so
sir.
in the
Yes,
old days
sir.
when we had dogs, there was plenty of dogs running around too. So you know we're good people if we like animals. And you know, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yes,
And I
sir.
think, you know, the one-dimensional business owner, I think is a sad. But there's been
Oh.
times in my entrepreneur career where I haven't been as grounded. In full
Mm-hmm.
transparency, Greta Kudo, I haven't been, right. I probably didn't lean
Mm-hmm.
on my faith as much,
Mm-hmm.
especially when times are bad. I didn't lean on my family enough. I didn't lean on. I became one-dimensional, which is just, and it's not healthy and it's not
Yes.
good. And so everything pays, right. So I think as
Right.
a business owner, it's easy to get absorbed, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like quicksand. And if things are going south, it could just take you over. So
For
you
sure.
need, the first question you asked was, you need faith. I think you do.
Right.
And whatever, whoever, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think we're all going to get there. It's just whoever you speak to them frequently, especially in business.
Mm-hmm.
And lean on the family. I think it's important, right? We
Family
had
is
the
everything.
kids active in the first business.
Mm-hmm.
Second business not so much because they have their own careers, but the
Mm-hmm.
first business they would be in the office. They would be stuffing direct mail pieces. They'd be putting up
That's
stamps on
amazing.
postcards. My
Yes.
son would be data entering because he was older, so he was able to use the computer. So we put him to
Yes.
work, right?
Yeah.
And you have to, right? And I just think, you know, there's so many things you could do. If they choose to go into entrepreneurship, I think getting acclimated to that as a young person, I think is very,
Right.
very important. If they don't choose to, that's fine too. I think getting acclimated to business is fine. I think it's important
Right.
too. So it's a
I,
long
I,
answer to a short question.
No, 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 no. You're fine. You're fine. Elaborate as much as you want to. This is a thing about when we do interviews, right? When you're interviewing your guest and they say something, you might have stipulated questions, but when they say something, you want to touch a little bit on those things because those are good things.
Sure.
So it flows. So I had a question from what you're saying. Have you always been an entrepreneur? Like, have you always been that guy, or you worked in a job
Yeah.
and then became that?
Yeah. So I think that I may have been always that guy, but
Wow.
I went into corporate America, right?
Okay.
And then,
Okay.
and so I'm an expat. So to answer your question, I gravitated to entrepreneurs, small business owners growing up, right? So
Okay.
the guys on the block gravitated to them. My aunts, my uncles that were,
Okay.
right? So on my dad's side, the family owned a produce business, which is the worst business in the world to be in, right? Because as soon as you
Oh,
leave the
really?
docks, your produce is decaying, right? So you got to sell what you got in the truck that day.
Oh,
So I
man.
learned from them. Then they moved into, they owned a factory, right? As you know,
Mhm.
so we would go there and work. Favorite uncle owned a distributorship, a very large Midwest distributorship. He was the first
Okay. Okay.
distributor of Japanese components, right?
Mhm.
So very cutting edge, right? And very risk taking. And then a lot of my friends, their families were small business owners. My dad was in computer science. You and I talked a little bit about
Yeah.
right? So he was in computers, and so you didn't really do that was big companies, and he was a programmer and a
Oh,
mainframe
wow.
guy and all
Right.
that. So he got me. He said technology is going to be there, right? So I've always been an early adopter of technology because we grew up with the Commodore 64 and the Altair and the Apple and the Apple II, and you name it, we had it all. So we knew technology was going to be a driver. In college, he said, go look, even if it's not your full look at computers. So I started studying computer science. I went to U of I. Would go visit it. My cousin was there, and her future husband was there. He took me to the U of I computer lab, and I saw what those guys were doing, and I knew I was never going to be able to. So I went over to the business school immediately, right? So like the next weekend, I went to the business school.
Lord.
Like I'm like,
no.
they were so far. I mean, I'll tell you, like you think these guys were, the early Netscapes, right? So you think they're here, you think you're here.
The king of nerds.
Oh yeah, they were here, right? I mean, they were.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And when you see that
the dedication,
I mean, it just blows you away, and you can't compete, right? So it's like, okay, not a problem. Let's pivot. And so, I read a marketing book and fell in love and understood it, and I knew I could be great at that. And so I think there's a lesson to the listeners is maybe the path isn't where you're on. Maybe the business has to pivot, right? Businesses pivot all day. Maybe the path you're on, you have to pivot, but don't be afraid to, right? And don't be afraid to start over. So we did that. Then I kind of went into big, wanted to get some experience, right? To learn, right? It's good to learn from big companies. They're set up for that. And started selling, right? I was, my first job was selling, right? So I was on the phone in a cubicle, didn't know any better. They said, read the script. I read the script, make 50 dials in the morning, make 50 dials in the afternoon. That's what I did, right? So you built up a book of business. I'm aging myself, right? But this is before, we had to go find banks of telephones. You remember, your listeners may not know what those are.
I know what you,
You had rolls of quarters, right? You drove around, you bought the manufacturer's guide. It was a big blue book. And now information is so easy and getting lists is so easy. But, that's how you build up the book. And so I learned. And then I started my first company, which was 2006 to 2012. I had investors in that, and I had partners. So we sold that. Then I went to work for the Magnetic Marketing. GKC was a great thing. And then this is the second run. So, I've done a couple runs, but I've also done corporate, some corporate space. And I don't feel negative about corporate, nor do I speak negatively about it. I learned a lot from them. And I think as business owners, some of your best employees are going to come from that. Because not everybody set out to be an entrepreneur. I don't think so. I think some people try because they don't want to have a boss, but the problem is they're a really bad employee, and now they can't be fired because they're the boss, right? So, I think you have to have a lot of soul searching to be an entrepreneur, because it's not
discipline. It takes everything. It's not for everybody.
Yeah. The
sacrifice. So what else, man? When you're talking, what I was thinking was, and how you mentioned you put your kids to work, and man, I wish I had a dad like that. I promise you that I wouldn't be where I'm at.
Yeah.
That is amazing. And now you're saying that your son and your daughter, they're in business as well?
Yeah, they're in business. They're not in their own business, right? So my son is an operations manager for a very large production company, and they do some phenomenal work. They produce all the environmentally safe packaging that you get to your house. So Amazon, Target, all those envelopes that you get that are biodegradable, they produce those. And my wife, my daughter works for a digital marketing agency. And so she's on the marketing side and has done that. And my wife is the CEO of an association, right? So she's in business too. So everybody's in business. She's got the biggest title in the house. So she kind of runs the house.
The show. I like that. There you go. Shout out to you, Vicky. Shout out to you.
Amen. Yes. There you go.
So let's get into your element. So I have some questions, and obviously, like I said, I don't even have to ask the whole questions. I just want it to flow, because from what you say, I could get something that, man, he needs to elaborate more on that. So I can ask you that. You know what I mean? So it's not like verbatim, we have to ask you every single thing, but I have it stipulated. Let's see how it goes. The first one is going to be on mindset and strategy. So the question is, what's the number one mindset shift that separates high growth companies from those that plateau early?
Yep. It's a great question. So I think the number one shift for a small business person, and I learned this from Dan, and you're an accolade of Dan,
Yeah.
has to be that you're not the doer of the business, but you're the marketer of the business. And so many times business owners get stuck in with being the chiropractor, right? Or the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, the accountant, whatever it is, the small business owner. But they have to kind of shift their mindset and they have to say, my number one job is to be the marketer of the business. And I am going to be the best marketer of that business that I could possibly be. And so I think that's the number one thing that a small business has to be. I think in a big business, what happens is they get that trajectory of growth, and we've all done it, and I've done it myself, right? So we got to 1 million, and you're like, oh, okay. And you've got systems and you've got processes, and it gets you to, the 2 million. And then you kind of take your foot off the gas.
Yes.
Right. Because it's like, man, I'm done being tired. Right. I'm done just kind of keep on pushing and pushing. And you as the business owner can never, I've learned by this mistake and I see it all the time. You can never take your foot off the gas. Every day you have to say, how do we get more new customers? How do we service the customers we have? How do we keep and retain the customers we have? Right. Because retention is the new growth. Right.
Yes.
And it's just, how do we keep on growing market share? You have to think that every day. Put your head in the pillow, say your prayers, wake up, say your prayers, and think growth. And I think what happens is we business owners just get a little tired, right? They get a little tired of the business. They get a little tired of the monotony. They get a little tired of the problems. And then that's when you take your foot off the gas. And I think too, you get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm at 2 million, I'm at 3 million, I'm at 5 million, I've made it. But then what you see with businesses is they start tippering off. We just took over for a client and they were at 25 million. They've plateaued to 7, right? And so it's like, okay, what happened? Right? You'll feel that, right? And so, okay, how do we get it back to where it needs to go? And some of it is that the marketplace shifts on them and they didn't have good conversations with customers of where they wanted to go and how do their products and services fit in. And sometimes listen, we're in the wild, wild west of AI, right? And I do think if you and I sit down a year from now, there will be some businesses that just couldn't make the leap, right? And there will be some. I mean, it's like the digital marketing space, right? If you said, oh, I'm not going to bother selling online, or I'm not going to bother marketing online in the early 2000s, in 2006, I was at the front end of that. We were making direct response websites for people, right? And it was like a new thing of lead capturing for people. And so I think you have to, and there's points where you have to constantly reinvent yourself, right? If you think about some of the great entrepreneurs of the past, the Wrigleys, right? I mean, he started out selling soap and then he sold something else and he found chewing gum, and chewing gum was an insert in the soap, right? And so many times entrepreneurs will constantly reinvent themselves, and especially the fast growth ones. And that's one of the mindset shifts that you have to be. So it's the first thing is I'm the marketer of the business. I'm the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. Second is I am constantly thinking about growth and I'm constantly pushing through that plateau. And I'm not taking my foot off the gas, and the staff take the foot off the gas. And I think the third and the final one, mindset shift, is going back to that small business you have to think of yourself as an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And there's a difference, right? A small business is the execution of XYZ product or service. But an entrepreneur is thinking, here is a group of customers. What are their pain points? And how can I find products and services to assist those people? And here's another one. And here's another one. Here's another one. And I'm constantly growing. And I think that's very, very important.
Very, very important. And, man, business is the only game. I'll call it a game.
It is.
It's the only game that I know that you never retire from.
You don't.
Never. And I remember reading the book, The Business Secrets from the Bible by Rabbi.
Sure. I love
Daniel
that book. Yeah. I love him. I've heard him speak.
Man,
he's phenomenal.
He's phenomenal. He said that Jews don't have the word retire in their language.
Yes.
Everything else you could retire from. I mean, the only thing I would say you can, but it has to be forced. I would say marriage, but everything else really you can retire from. but he says business, never, 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 never. So like the way you structured it, that's why what you said is true. Not everybody can do that.
Right.
Everybody thinking, there has to be a time I'm done, man. I've given everything I have, because you have to be a lot of things, especially when you're growing in it. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think you're spot on, right? And anytime you could drop that book, it's a great book for people to read. I think, if you think about, let's go and look at Sam Walton, right? Sam Walton, entrepreneur, and was started out as a small business owner. He bought a 5 and 10 franchise, right? But then he grew it into something fierce.
Yes,
and
sir.
Never retired. The kids knew that sure they're going to do family vacation, but part of family vacation, Dad was going to go away and go look at local stores and walk floors, and and I think you have to constantly think about that. Who's my customer? What's their problems? How do I help them solve their problem? Many times we see businesses and their solutions looking for problems versus problems looking for people to help, right? Ooh, and I think that's a key, it's a key understanding. And somebody told me that once and it stuck with me. And I think the more you could go and as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, study. Right? Study the people that we've dropped here, the Dan Kennedy's, the world, the rabbi.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But go back, right? Go back and study the biographies of people in your industry, people outside your industry. I was listening to, I think it was an excerpt of Bill Gates. It was probably when Source Code just came out, right? So his biography just came out. And he had said that they asked him, well, when did you think that you were out of the woods, right? And he said, probably when I was about 55.
Really?
I was already a billionaire. And he's like, he goes, I finally could feel like Microsoft made it, right? And it's like this, it's just unbelievable that sometimes we as small business owners think, okay, I made it to $500,000, or I made it to $1 million, or made it to 3 million. I'm out of the woods. And that goes back to your first question, which is a great question. It's the mindset issue. Somebody who said that they were in his car and they looked and there was no radio. And they said, what, did you get robbed? He goes, no. He goes, I have 35 minutes to drive from my house to the Microsoft campus and 35 minutes to drive home. And if I go for lunch, he goes, I only want to think about Microsoft. Wow. So it's that maniacal focus on products,
the obsessive compulsion to it.
Who would do that? But that's
right. You must be insane to do that.
I'm not saying everybody should go out tomorrow and rip out the radios, right? Because you're going to, but maybe cover it up, right? Or put the phone away and just think about the business. And I think the other thing too, and you probably see this with your work, is we don't work as hard as we actually think we do, right? Because there's a lot of wasted time, right?
Yes,
so when you work, and when you play, right? And you got to divide it. Now, everybody's going to say, listen, I'm working hard. And I said, yeah, but if we were to kind of put something on your computer, we could probably see you're on Facebook for an hour a day. No judgment, right? I'm pointing a finger like going back at me. You're on LinkedIn. You're on your phone. So let's take those 3 hours and put them to work, right? So when you work, and when you play, you play.
Yes.
And you have to do that, and you have to have that. And that's that mindset, right? That mindset that I saw with some of the best entrepreneurs in the world was maniacal and focused on growth, right? Now, sometimes they wouldn't even, sometimes they'd get in the car and start driving to the office and forget put shoes on. They were that focused and maniacal about getting to where they needed to get to. But you have to be, right?
And it goes back to that level.
Yeah, you have to be. And it goes back to my first statement, which was kind of offhanded, but it was the truth is sometimes people get into entrepreneurship because they don't want to have a boss. The problem is they're a really bad employee and they can't be fired because they're now the boss. And so that's good news and bad news, but they ain't going to make it, right?
They ain't going to make it
until they make it.
Of course not.
Yeah, till they make the flip.
Man, this stuff you just said brings me to something that I saw a video the other day. I don't know if you've probably seen this kind of videos, all these street interviews but this one is specific to the guys. His niche is asking multimillionaires and billionaires.
He stops them on the street.
Yeah.
I want to see the one where he gets punched because, at a certain point, you go to New York and you do that, you're going to get punched, right? And when he's in Austin, Texas, so people are nice there.
I
Yeah, but
bet
he's
you
built up a
he's
nice book of
staged.
business.
He's staged. He has to
Yeah,
be.
has to be. Has to be.
How do you
Yeah.
even have access to get that close? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
has to be staged.
yeah.
But one of them was the lawyer. The one I just saw is the lawyer. I don't know if you saw that one too,
No.
where he interviewed the lawyer. He came and, you know, that's how I even know it's staged. And he asked him, there were like 4 guys. He asked them, who's the richest guy here? And all of them pointed at this guy. And the guy pointed at him, that's the interviewer. And, you know, they laughed. And then he goes and asks him something that this guy, I've never heard anybody say this. So I want to pick your brain on this.
Sure, go ahead.
He asked him, what advice would you give to someone that is trying to be like you? Because the guy he's interviewing is a billionaire, but he said he has one of the biggest law firms in the country. And Forbes has written about him. I don't even remember his name, but Forbes labeled him a billionaire. So when he asked him, what do you think about if someone was trying to be like you, what do they have to do? And he said, well, I think you have to be born with it. Just like a lion in the jungle is born to be a lion. And he's called the king of the jungle. A sloth is born as a sloth. I mean, I want to challenge that thought, but it's hard for me to challenge that thought with that analogy. So what do you think about that? Can someone actually, you know how you mentioned all the maniacal focus?
Yeah.
Are people born with that maniacal focus, or can they actually learn to be maniacally focused?
So I think they could learn to be maniacally focused, yes. But I think there's an inner drive that has to, for a billionaire, right?
Okay.
Now, I think a maniacal focused, very, very focused entrepreneur could easily get to $1 million, right?
Okay.
And easily get,
Okay.
and then when you get to $1 million, it becomes easier to get to the other points.
Right.
You could hire staff, right? You're not doing it. You're all yourself. You know, you could delegate work. And so there's an easiness to getting to certain levels. But I think you go back, I think great entrepreneurs are like great athletes. There's only one Michael Jordan, right? There's only one Kobe, right? They are just focused. They are just driven, and they elevate it, and they make it look easy because we don't see the that they're up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And they're focused on their diet, right? And, you know, or the Tom Brady's, you know, and how, if you read and study great athletes, I think there's a parallel probably to great billionaires. Yeah.
Are you kidding me? That is, I agree with you, sir. Yeah. So, okay, so you're saying that it depends. So this is what I'm understanding from what you're saying. I could be wrong. You're saying that you can learn to be maniacally focused to a degree where I think that's what you're saying. Then when you get to that degree, the innate nature of you now can take you to the next level. If you have it. Or if you have it.
Or you're going to be capped.
Or you're going to be plateaued, right?
Yeah,
you're going to just be there. Okay. Yeah. That actually makes more sense to me than that means that the analysis he gave it's a little skewed, I would say. It's a little skewed because you can learn to a certain degree, but there has to be something innate in you to keep you going. When everybody's like, nah, I'm good. And they're really good because when they get to that, someone can make $1 million and say, I'm really good.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I don't want people to think that we're kind of brushing off getting to $1 million because I think that's a yeoman's event for some small businesses. But I do think that for some, there's never enough. And that's, I think, what his analogy is.
Yes, and that it cannot be learned is what he's saying.
No, that's hardwired, right?
That's hardwired.
There's never enough, and they are just now. Sometimes it's childhood trauma, right? That maybe they come from abject poverty, right? And they're like, I'm never going back. And so there's some things that they have, maybe that's in their hardwiring, or some of it might be, is it environmental or is it hardwiring? Is it nurture or nature? There's plenty smarter people that study this than me, but I think that there's you could learn to be maniacally focused and grow your business to a certain level, but to get to that billion, to get to that, these massive, you have to do, you
have to be hardwired for that.
Yeah. You got to be hardwired for that.
Look, this conversation we're having.
And I think it's worthy. It's worthy. To kind of, because I mean, when you were explaining it, it made me think it through, and it's worthy. I think it's a worthy pursuit, and I think it goes back to what we started talking about a little bit earlier. It's that guy will never take the foot off the gas,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That guy that we talked about, and it's the lawyer that built, to $1 billion. And he said, there's two kinds. That guy will never waste time at his desk watching Facebook or YouTube videos that aren't to move his business forward.
Yes.
Because his pleasure comes from growth. His pleasure comes from building. His pleasure comes from yet another decimal point or another zero or another acquisition. And I think there's always kind of, we revert back to the mean as humans, right? So we push and then sometimes we revert back, right? If there isn't a push constantly, and you have to find your inner motivation to get to that push, to be constantly pushing to get to the next level.
Wonderful. I love it already. Okay. So let's get to the next question, man.
Sure.
So this one is now about hiring and culture. How do fast-growing companies attract and retain top talent while scaling at speed?
So you have two words in there, and the second one is the most important one, which is culture. And I think that business owners need to think about how their culture is from their first hire and their second hire. And you constantly have to be building your culture. And there was a point in my life where I was vice president of sales and I got promoted to president. I thought about the culture of the sales team, but then I had to think about the culture of the company. And you have to constantly work and push and articulate and repeat and push and articulate your culture, right? And so your fast growth culture has the business owner and as the executive team and as people that are part of it, you constantly have to be thinking about it. Constantly have to be expressing your values, constantly have to say, here's what we're doing. You constantly have to be hiring for it, right? So your question is, how do you hire for it? You have to look for that. And you have to feel like people that are comfortable in fast growth companies, because fast growth companies and fast growth cultures are messy because they're pivoting, right? They're doing a lot of stuff. And so you have to find somebody that's very comfortable in that environment and have them and then just, that you hire to your culture. Yes. And I think what sometimes we do is we hire to the position or we hire to the tactics or we hire to the personality, but you have to hire to your culture. And the companies that do it well, you just get it, right? You just get it. You go
to your culture.
Like you drive and you go to Chick-fil-A. They have a pretty good culture.
Yes.
I would say go back 10 years ago and Starbucks had a really good culture and they lost it, right? It got, go to Disney. It's got a really good culture. And I was talking to somebody, I was interviewing somebody that used to be a trainer for Disney. And we talked about, it was in the Disney food and beverage side of the business. And I said, how long does the average waiter or waitress get trained for at Disney before they get put on the floor? And he said,
a very good question.
Yeah. He said 30 to 45 days before they're right. I said, how about the average restaurant up and down the street? He said, if they're lucky, a week, right? They're probably within 2 days, they're on the floor on their own, carrying plates.
That's true.
And so their culture is that we are not putting anybody on the floor that it hasn't been trained for 30 to 45 days. And so I think you have to really be thinking about that. But also your point is extremely important, Akudo, which is what about culture and speed? So you have to hire people for that, right? People that are good at just figuring out a little bit and just taking it and running with it to the next level.
No, I have, from what you said, I have probably 3 questions.
Okay.
Well, maybe 2, but one is like 2 in 1. So something you said when you were president of the sales team or president of the company, you said you were thinking about the culture of the sales team and then the culture of the company. Are they different?
So
can you elaborate on that?
That's a good question. It's a good pickup on yours. So I said, when I was vice president of sales, I just focused on the culture of the sales team because that was my department.
Okay.
But when I became business, the vice president, the president of the business, I had to think about the entire culture. Now, were they different? Yes. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Different cultures.
Okay. There you go.
Right. Different.
There you go.
Because you have different personalities. Right. And your accounting department will never mirror and act
makes sense.
Your sales people, but you can all have a culture of maniacal focus on the customer, right? You could all have a culture of maniacal focus on providing the best products and services to the marketplace. But what you find in many companies is that everybody has a fiefdom, right? And you have to kind of break down those fiefdom, those
fiefdom
hierarchies,
That's
right?
interesting.
This is my department. Don't bother. I'm going to manage it. And I was just talking to somebody that's doing a lot of work with companies, and it's with trust. And he said, where do you think the biggest problem and lack of trust is in a corporation? And I said, I don't know, maybe the sales team, right? Because they're all fighting for deals. And he goes, no, and the executive team. And he goes, they don't trust each other. And I said, well, executive team, right? And I said, executive team that doesn't trust each other is never going to move to the next level. Right. And so, it's difficult, but it's interesting.
That is interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So wait, okay, hold on. So the most chaos is within the executive team,
right?
More than the other.
Well, the most lack of trust was the point that he was making. So, and one could argue that maybe it's got the most chaos, but it's controlled chaos, and it's probably professional chaos, but it's chaos.
Oh,
right?
Okay. Oh, wow. That's good to know, though, because I think I agree. I don't know if you've heard this about Elon Musk. He's so goal oriented that the way he divides his time is in a year. He divides it in 52 different goals of the year, which means one a week, that he comes to the office, solve the problem for the week, and moves on. And then the next week has another problem, not the same as the last one. Have you heard that before?
I heard parts of this. I think you can't argue with what he's accomplished.
I know.
Right? You can't argue. Your hat has to go off to what he's accomplished. Yeah. And I think there is something goes back to the maniacalness that we've talked about. This guy's sleeping on the floor of the factory, right? I mean, so now listen, my guess is he's flying around in a private, his life isn't that bad, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But that, that's I'm going to do whatever it takes and lead by example to move to the next level. And I think you have to do that.
But do you think it's feasible for like small to mid-sized businesses to do the same thing? Is it feasible for them?
Yeah, probably. What's the goal of the week, right? What's the goal of the week? And it could be something as small as we're going to acquire 5 new customers. Okay. And everybody focuses on acquiring 5 new customers.
But then that means that next week, you're not going to talk about acquiring 5 new customers.
You got to find your next goal, right?
Yeah.
Next goal. Now, you could hardwire it and say, our evergreen goal is 5 new customers every week. And you're probably going to set the company up for failure because there's going to be you don't get to that. But I think there's a way to do it, right? You see a lot of good companies that are run by the EOS, right? The Gino Wickman model, which is a 90-day sprint. So here are the goals for 90.
Right.
Here's what we're going to accomplish for 90 days.
Yeah.
And I think that might be a little bit easier, right? For small businesses and their teams to think about versus every week we have a goal.
A new goal.
Yeah. I mean, we used to do that, right? What are your top 3 objectives for this week, right? Or the month, however long your vantage point is.
Wow. Okay. Good to know. Let's get to the next question.
I think the lesson, though, I think one is your question is a great question because it makes you think, right? And that's how we think. Yes. And we also have to think the opposite side of it, which is kind of what your second part of your question is. Yes. Will this work for small businesses? Yeah. So, you have to say, I'm going to go out and study great entrepreneurs, great small business owners. I'm not going to take everything that they do, right? But I'm going to take something that will work or something slightly similar to what they do and modify it for my business.
Got
you. And can I get the results, right? Or does it get me the results that I want? And I think that's the most important thing to be thinking about.
So now something that came to mind literally right now, because I was going to go to the next question, but something that came to mind because of what you said is, so what's the difference between being married for 35 years and someone being married for 2 years? Can someone that's married for 2 years, how would I say it? Would I say act or implement the same thing that you've done at this point at 35 years, right?
Yeah.
Can they implement the same strategies you use for your marriage in their 2-year-old marriage and it'll work?
I think so. So I think.
Okay.
it's 30. We've been together for 35. So, okay.
Yes,
In
yes,
case
yes.
she
Okay,
listens to this,
yes,
I don't want
yes.
her to think that
Yes,
I'm
yes, 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 yes.
elaborating. So I think that's a great question, right? Because I think marriage is every year,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you're
Mm-hmm.
just, and you got to get better and you got to change every year, right? So I think in the
Yes.
beginning, you're both, I think as you mature and age together, you become more comfortable in who you are. So therefore you could give more of yourself to the other person.
Really?
Right. And I think you have to celebrate your spouse, significant other, partner every day and make those efforts and realize that, on day one of the marriage, you think it's going to be sunshine and roses. By 2 years in, you realize it's not sunshine and roses every day. Right. And so you need to constantly
Shoot.
be open and honest, right? And
Shoot.
have the
Right.
integrity to have a good conversation and not hold everything back and
Yes, sir.
realize, there's a great book, but I think it's called like the love languages, right? The 5 love
Gary
languages.
Chapman.
Yeah, yeah. And
Familiar.
it's everybody has, and I think going through that as a young couple is very, very smart of saying, I prefer, verbal, right? Or I prefer
Right.
presence. And so I think it's just knowing that. Now, granted, Akudo, there's
Mhm.
a point where when you have children, you're
Mhm.
just focusing on keeping them safe, right? And growing them into positive citizens, right? So then now that becomes the focus. But where people falter is they don't also focus on the marriage. Then when the kids go away, they realize, oh, now I've got this empty vessel, right? Or, it's just
So they lose themselves at that
they
time.
lose themselves.
Okay.
You constantly have to be focused on
Okay.
how can we celebrate each other, celebrate the marriage, and continue to grow. And I think, it's, I don't think we have all the answers, right? Vicky
No,
and
no,
I,
no. Of course not.
but we try to be better at it every day, right?
Right.
Try to articulate it every day. And I think you have to realize that you're going through it and it's not one dimensional, it's 3-dimensional, or probably 5-dimensional, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
I was
you
going
know,
to say
you,
more
you
than 3
yeah, you're
for sure.
constantly on,
Yeah.
and sometimes you're on different, like you're playing different games, right? One
Yeah.
person's playing football, the other person's playing chess, right?
Yes.
So you kind of
Yes.
have to say, hold on, let's both decide which one we want to play.
That's, you see what I'm saying about having all these questions from
Sure.
your explanation, more questions come. Yeah, it's true that how you mentioned your kids in the beginning. Something I wanted to say on to that is, yes, when your kids are successful, that I think that's a true representation of the effort you put in their lives. But so now what I'm thinking is, when it comes to business and marriage, I mean, there's no point in saying that it wouldn't be the same. The way I asked the question about the 2-year-old marriage and a 30-year-old or 35-year-old marriage, if God didn't want there to be something to be learned, he wouldn't have books written about it. I don't think people that have experienced things and put it down for us to learn from. However, we still have a choice to make. Because I'm originally Nigerian, right? So there's a saying in my culture: when a rich man tells a poor man what it takes to be wealthy, the poor man says, I'll be right back. So he's always said that, in other words, they're saying that the poor man has always said that if I had what he had, I will give this and that, right? So then they brought them together and they said, okay, Mr. Rich Man, educate this guy so he can have what you have, so that he can go and do all these things that he said he would do. But now the rich man now said, okay, this is what you do. This is what you do. I have 52, for example, right? I have 52 goals in a year. I do one a week.
Yeah.
You have to wake up at 3 a.m., blah, 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 blah. He lists all these things. The poor man is like, dude, I'll be right back. I'll be right back. He quits because he can't do it. But at least he had the option to see what is going on and then quits by himself. So I'm saying that because if on the estimation of marriage and business, at least God is giving us the opportunity to at least know what it takes to get to that level, both in marriage, in love and relationship and business. Now we have the choice to do it or not do it. So I think it can be learned, but it's up to us.
What
do you think? What do you think?
I think I love your analogy. I'm going to use that. And I think it can be learned. And I think
Yes.
hopefully you have good role models, right? Both of us are blessed with
Yes, sir.
parents that are still married and still around. So you have good role models and we've learned from those relationships. But I also think that it goes back to, like, not everyone could decide to be an entrepreneur, but you have to work at it. everybody can decide to get married, but you have to work at it.
Ooh.
And a lot of us, when faced with, oh my gosh, that's pretty daunting, will
Yeah.
do what the poor man does and says, I'll be right back. Right. And then they'll be like, well, no one helps me, or no one, and we're always looking to deflect the blame.
Right.
Right?
Right.
But I think you have to have that internal motivation, but also internal knowledge to say, this is it. I'm in it. Right. And I'm in it with
Right.
you. And so we're going to go. And it's, the both partners have to be focused on it and
Focused on
building
it.
on it. But it's certainly not, it's like business is not for the faint of heart. Right. But you have to do it. You have to do it.
It's not.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I agree. Now we'll get to the next question is
Sure.
decision making.
Okay.
So the question says, in high growth environments, decisions need to be made quickly. How do you balance speed with avoiding costly mistakes in making those decisions?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And I think, if we talked about Elon Musk, right? Fail fast,
Yes.
right? Fail forward. So you're going to go fast and you're going to make some mistakes, and you have to realize that. You're going to go fast and your staff's going to make some mistakes, and you have to realize that.
Yes, sir.
And the key is, how do you control it so it doesn't bankrupt the company, right? But mistakes are going to be made. And if you want a culture that is innovative, you have to really focus on your mistakes and celebrate them, I think, because of the fact that it's going to, there's going to be product lines that you bring to the marketplace that isn't received by the marketplace. And maybe it's just timing, right? But that means it wasn't the right thing to do. It just means it was 5 years too early. So then you got to go back and celebrate.
Oh, really? Like that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm okay with mistakes. And I think you have to have an environment that focuses on it, and you realize that you're going to go fast. You're going to break some eggs, right? You're going to fail forward, but that's got to be part of your culture. You just got to control it so it doesn't bankrupt the organization.
You have to control. So the question now is, how do you control it?
Well, that's a great question, right? If I had that, we would bottle that up and sell it for millions of dollars.
It's not. I know that one is not easy,
right? But let's think of we're drawing parallels from books and movies and sports.
Yes.
Let's think of a great business movie which could have bankrupted the company or could have faltered, which I think is Air, right? The Michael Jordan.
Have I watched it? No. Air. AIR.
Air, which is about Nike and the creating of the Michael Jordan brand and the Michael Jordan shoe.
Yeah. It just came out like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah. But it's great.
Shoot, I haven't seen it.
And, they pushed for a deal. The Jordan family pushed for a deal that was unheard of, right? Now, it worked out for all parties, but it could have been one that,
I know.
Yeah, could have broken the bank, right? Or could have faltered, right? And so I think it goes back to the guy that said, I don't think everybody could do it because there are lions and there's sloughs, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think there's I'm going all in, right? And I'm betting on, I'm going all in. And there's that mentality, and that's part of business, right? You got to know when you think it's the right time to go all in. And
so there has to be some kind of gut feeling?
I think there is a gut feeling. There's an intuition, right? There's a speaking, maybe it's coming from a higher power that we talked about. But there's this is it, right? And the beautiful thing about entrepreneurs, especially really aggressive and focused entrepreneurs, is they will then work, even if it doesn't work out, they will then work to make it work, right? And you got to do that work. And it goes back to mistakes will be made, right? It goes back to your culture thing. Mistakes will be made, but that's okay. But we're going to work through it, right? So how do you stop it from bankrupting the company? Is stop it, stop the bleeding, right? If you're going all in and all of a sudden it's not working, stop the bleeding, but then realize now we have to make up the ground and we have to figure this out, right? And how do you
stop the bleeding?
Pardon me?
Like, let's say that is the
like,
employees that are causing the problem.
Yeah, I mean, you launched the wrong product to the marketplace and it's not being received by the marketplace. You stop it, pull it back, right? Hopefully you have other product lines that you continue to go and you focus on, right? You go in after a customer or a customer base and you're not making headway into that customer base. Either you got to shift your marketing or shift your sales, right? Your business development to get into that marketplace.
Got you.
And after a certain point, And after a couple different gyrations,
Okay.
you got to say, nope, sorry, we're moving on.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Business
Total
is
sense.
based on managing risk, right? You can't mitigate risk. You can't eliminate it in business, but you have to manage it.
Man, there's so much similarity with marriage and
Oh, 100%.
and business. I mean, some say marriage is a business.
Probably.
Right?
Yeah, probably.
Speaking of that, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to throw you off the loop a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
But this is something that I've been learning lately about. What are your thoughts on prenuptial agreement?
I don't like them.
You don't like them?
Not at all.
True. Talk to me. Why not?
Well, one is you're negating. I think you're going to exponentially grow as humans and as a couple, but then your net worth is going to grow. And
Okay.
so you're coming into the thing saying, I'm keeping this as an exit strategy. It's like you got to go back in your car,
Interesting.
right? And
Yes.
so I think you have to say, okay, I'm bringing everything in because I'm bringing my whole self to the marriage, and everything I got, everything you got, problems, good, we're gonna have it. So I don't like them.
Interesting.
And you as a couple will grow, right? And you'll grow the business together. And even if she or he isn't actively engaged in the business, she's still in the house, right? She's still emotional support for you.
Right.
And so you wouldn't be able to achieve everything that you can achieve without your
her.
partner.
Right.
So
I agree to that 100%. And what about people that say this? This is the analogy I've been hearing is just like insurance in a car. You're not thinking of crashing your vehicle, but you do get insurance just in any case you do. Does that mean you're not does that mean you look at your vehicle any less than it is or something like that? Some kind of analogy like that. What are your thoughts on that?
yeah, I think first off, you're legally bound to get insurance on your car, right? Because you can't get a
Right.
license and you
We
can't get a
are.
car.
We
So
are. So the
Um,
argument is already different.
yeah, and I think sometimes too is things will happen unbeknownst to your control, especially in driving, right? You go, I live in Chicago. You get on the expressways. It's the wild, wild west.
Right.
So you have to realize that. I think you can't go in thinking that you need an escape hatch because you're going to
Got
pull
you.
that escape hatch. Just my opinion.
Yes, sir. Of course. And that's why I wanted to get your opinion on that. Okay. Now let's get to the next question that on our list. Customer focus. This one. So many fast-growing companies obsess over customer experience. What is a counterintuitive way that they leverage customer feedback, fuel growth? So I'm thinking it's like, what's a counterintuitive way that they can, I think, leverage customer feedback to fuel growth would be the more appropriate question.
So I remember watching an interview, and I think it was Carly Sanchez, but it may not have been. But I watched an interview, and she was interviewing a digital marketing guy that really understood it, but it was really more for the consumer-based products.
Okay,
He
like
said
B2C,
right? B2C, mostly sold online. Okay. And he said customer reviews. He goes, it's counterintuitive, but 1-star reviews drive more sales to the business than 5-star reviews.
What?
I know. All right. It's counterintuitive.
No way.
But he said you get more clicks and more people buying from your 1-star reviews than you do from your 5-star.
What?
So goes back to your thing about your counterintuitive. I'm not saying go out and get a bunch of 1-stars.
Right.
But realize that there is feedback and there's gold in those 1-stars. And I think if you as the business owner have somebody or yourself that's responding to them, it's very, very important. But you always hear that people are, listen, complaints are gifts, right? So you're going to get feedback, and negative feedback. You could do 2 things with it. One is you could just shut it down and not listen to it. Or 2 is you could use it to fuel your growth. And so I think you need to, right? I think you need to focus on, okay, what are they saying, or what those that aren't happy saying? Right. And are they still buying from us? They're just not happy, or are they feeling the growth? So I think you need to think about that at all times. And so the counterintuitiveness would be, 1-star reviews fuel as much growth, if not more, than 5-star reviews.
That's the first time I've ever heard that, and that's fantastic to look more into. I'm definitely gonna I'm definitely going to check that out.
Yeah, right.
Very good. Interesting. Okay. That's why, yeah, man, you learn every day.
You have to.
Like,
In this
wow.
world, yeah, you have to.
That is some wisdom level that is interesting to me. So the next one is innovation and adaptability. So the question is, how do the most successful high growth companies stay innovative when scaling rapidly? Now, there's a caveat to this. I want you to add with the innovation of AI, right?
Yeah.
How are they going to stay innovative, man?
I mean, man, oh man, like hold on, because this is going to be just huge. I just think about how AI has changed in 6 months.
Tell me about it.
Right?
Tell me about it.
I mean,
God.
and you could be a
Man.
Luddite and say it's not going to change, or you could be adaptable to it.
Right.
And I think you have to. Now, is it going to, I think it's going to change that you maybe don't need as much headcount as you think you do, right? You could eliminate, you could offshore some jobs. I think it's going to be, I think just the process of thinking is going to get better if you use AI to drive your thinking, right?
Yes, sir.
And I think thinking in business drives innovation, right? And I think you're going to be forced to innovate constantly. I think it's also going to be demands of consumers or businesses, right? If you're selling B2C or B2B, demands will also drive innovation.
Okay.
But one can also make the argument, or I'm going to speak on both sides of my mouth like a politician, but one can make the argument that innovation it comes to the market without the marketplace knowing it, right? If you think about Apple, I don't think they've really brought an innovative product to the market in a while.
Thank you.
I think I think the phone was very innovative. The iPod and iPad.
Yeah, and the iPod. Yeah, iPod and iPad. Yeah.
But I don't think they brought an innovative product to the marketplace
I agree.
within a handful of years.
Yeah.
If you think about Elon, who we're talking about, well, certainly innovative, bringing the Tesla car and the SpaceX rocket,
Right.
I mean, and so I think sometimes innovation comes from outside, right? Of saying, well, why do we always
Market decides.
Right?
Okay. I see
Right.
what you
And,
mean.
how do we drive to the next thing?
The
If you
need.
think about food, right, in restaurants, innovative. I mean, I think there's constant innovation in it. Some of it is for it's become an art form. I think about food a lot, right? And how it's evolved, right? Good and bad. But I also think about, this is where I'm going with this story. So bear with me, and have your audience bear with me for 2 seconds. Think about how much you watch the Food Channel, right? There's food going, and there's probably 3 or 4 different food channels, right? My wife likes watching them. And I see like the baking shows, and there's young kids doing that. And these are young kids that are, 12 or younger and engaged in baking and engaged in cooking, engaged in food. And so what I mean is innovation is going to come from them because they're so engaged in it that there's going to be so much creativity that's going to happen because they're embracing it at a young age, right? And so I think there's young programmers that are embracing AI, that innovation is going to come to the next level, right? Open source coding is going to come to the next level. If you think about innovation, in manufacturing, that's going to, it's going to be safer. It's going to be better. It's going to be robotic. So that means we're going to need less people, but we're also going to get
3D printing
cheaper. And so innovation will be there, and it's always going to be there. And I think you have to, when you're scaling, I think, to make quantum leaps in your business, you need innovation. I think to get steady growth and steady market share and 10% growth and 20% growth and new market, that's great. But you're talking about rapid growth when you're talking about this. That's going to come from innovation. That's bringing new products and services or new delivery of products and services to the marketplace.
Interesting. So would you say that with that in mind, that AI can replace us?
Yes.
Is there a possibility?
Yes. Not going to replace the plumber, not going to replace the, because still physically need to do that. So I think if you think about in the sales world, which is a world that I play in a lot, I think the BDR, right, business development rep, I think
Is
a lot of
replaceable.
it'll be replaceable. Will it replace salespeople? I don't know. I don't think we're there yet. Some people will say yes. I don't think we're there yet. Analysts, right? A great job as a young person coming out of college. I read Chase Bank is saying AI is doing better and faster and more work than young analysts are doing. So I think there's going to be some things, right? Think now you got to be careful because there's hallucinations going on in AI, right? And I don't think we're there yet with law, and I don't think we're there yet with medicine. But don't you? I mean, I start the draft of a project or a proposal or something, type it myself, put it in AI, make it better, then bounce it around a couple times. So, is it going to replace us? Yeah, for the most part. But I think it's going to make us better too as humans.
No, think about this. You know how in the book Think and Grow Rich, he talked
Sure.
about how the car industry disrupted the horse transportation industry. Or so, I don't know what to call it, horse transportation. But you know how the heaves of the horses, is it called the heaves or what?
The hooves?
The hooves. Okay. You know how he said that industry, they had an industry that actually used to shine or polish it or something like that.
Okay.
And when Henry Ford invented the car, that industry died, even though we still have horses though. But what happened was new jobs were created with that industry. So would you say that is a possibility that, yes, those type of jobs will be replaced, but then newer jobs will be. So in other words, wouldn't you argue that you don't think that it might replace us ever because newer ways to manage them, I guess, maybe? I might be wrong.
I mean, you think
devil's
about,
advocate.
we thought Excel was going to wipe out, it didn't, right? People are using it, right? We're just using it. But I do think that instead of hiring 5 BDRs, maybe you only need 1 or 2, right?
Okay,
right?
I see what you mean.
So it's going to may not eliminate them entirely, but it may cause a head count. So now you have, 3 people. I'm not saying that you get rid of them, right? Is there things you could use to deploy them? With great technology, you could use it for good or you could use it for bad, right?
100%.
And we'll use nuclear. Nuclear could destroy civilization, but it also could fuel us, right? It could create electricity.
Yes, sir.
And there's environmentally safeness to it if it's done properly.
Right.
I think it's whatever vantage point. I'm always bullish on technology. I think
same here.
I think it's great, right?
It's great. Look, I talked to a friend of mine I actually interviewed him. So he's he's in software development. He actually programs, and this guy is afraid. He's afraid of AI, man, taking over. And I told him, bro, you're the guy that should be like very excited about it. Can't wait to make great things out of it. But
I think you have to be cautious, right? But cautiously optimistic. But I'm bullish.
Yes. Yeah. Man, no. As a spiritual guy that I am, I do not think that God would just sit idly by and let us be wiped away by something we created. Heck no. But that's for spiritual people.
I think that's for historians, the answer, not us, right?
Right. Okay, so the next question would be funding and financial strategy. That's a good one. I love funding.
I think. I mean, that's your ballyhook. So I think that is good and bad, right? You need it to grow, you need it to acquire. So using it smart is appropriate, right? And I think funding is important for business. Funding new products and services, right? Funding new geographical territories that you want to go after. That's how business is done, right? And that's why we have the stock market, so you could have access to capital, and you have great people like yourself that focus on helping small businesses fund acquisition. Finance, equipment, right, or manufacturing equipment, or whatever it is. And so you need it. I mean, it's in business, it's risk, it's managing risk, it's managing your cash flow, it's managing your using smart funding to grow and acquire and fuel growth. So it's mission critical, and you need good partners.
You used to work at
you do. to make sure that they do it right.
Yes, sir. So you used to work at an equity firm, a private equity firm.
Well, I worked for a private equity owned company. I didn't work at the firm, but I learned a
Oh,
lot.
okay, okay.
I learned a lot from them.
Like what do you guys do? Or what did
So what I learned, one is I
Uh-huh.
remember I congratulated the founder of the PE firm on an acquisition. He goes, the acquisition means nothing. He goes, anybody can acquire the business because it's
Right.
all about the selling of the business, right? And
Ooh,
so there's some truth
word.
in that. The second
Yes,
thing
sir.
I learned was how they thought through. And sometimes people would agonize, and he's like, well, no, look at Facebook. You spend $7 to acquire a new customer on Facebook or acquire a new lead, right? Then it was $15 to turn that lead into a customer, right? They just did the math.
Yes,
And
sir.
to
Yes, sir.
them, it's okay, we could fuel the math as long as our
Yes, sir.
numbers pan out. Once we got a model, right? So you
Oh, I
build out the
see.
business model, the financial model, right? The
Mhm.
funding model, and now you can continue to go forward.
So, okay.
There is financial engineering that you saw with a private equity of, debt, putting debt onto the business, right? And
Mhm.
so, there's a lot of things you could do from a balance sheet perspective or for net income, EBITDA. Everything was driven by
Yes, sir.
EBITDA. So there's a lot of things you learn, but really the other funny thing, and you'll get a kick out of this, we
Yes, sir.
agonize over the deck, right? The board deck. We would spend
Oh,
days, weeks, everybody get their PowerPoints and everything, it's a 100-page.
really?
These guys would only turn the financials. That's all they cared about. There was 4 pages that they flipped to. Everything else was noise.
Really?
Listen, you have to have a scorecard in business, right?
Yes,
You
sir.
have to have and the financing of the business and the financials is what tells the story and keeps score. So
Man, one day, by the grace of God, one day I'm definitely gonna create my own private
you
equity
will.
firm,
I got
man.
you. I believe in you. You'll do it.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
I'm
you'll do
reading a
it. You're
book
a hustler.
called Empire Builder by
Yeah.
Adam Colfer. Man, he's talking about how to build a business and sell it and create some kind of private equity
Yeah.
under to be able to acquire it. And man, it sounds so complicated, but of course it's doable.
I
But
think I read
I'm
that
looking.
book. I think that's a good book.
It
He came
is.
up, wasn't he acquiring almost like blue collar businesses?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Good book. I listened to it on tape. Yeah.
He's acquired even
Yeah.
done billion-dollar acquisitions, but he talked about how you can do it in stages: 1,000,000, 10, 100 million, and of course
Yeah.
a
You don't need
billion.
the elephant all in one bite.
No, of course not. But he was talking, man. You see what I'm saying? God has given us those strategies and things to learn from. Now it's up to us to implement.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
don't want you to
definitely
say, I'll be
doable.
right back. I want you to do this.
No, I'm not that guy to say
You
I'll be
don't
right
say, I'll
back.
be right back.
Heck
Just say,
no.
I'm going to do this.
I'm definitely yes. It's been it's something that I'm definitely working towards accomplishing one day.
Yeah.
This one is going to be the last question, so I don't keep
Yeah.
you too long because you've been so generous. Thank you, sir.
Well, you're
This
welcome.
one is
Thank
about
you.
leadership and scaling. As a company scales, leadership challenges evolve. Just like you told me about the executive teams and stuff.
Yeah.
That's a good one. So I think
Well,
this
I'm going to
would
go
play a
back
role.
so I'm going to go back to that one.
Yes.
So what holds companies back from scaling is the founders. I don't want to come across as cold and callous, but the founders keeping people, especially in leadership roles, past their ability to grow and to
Oh,
grow their
wow.
divisions or to grow the company. And so if you think
That's a
about
good
it,
one.
what gets you to 2 million and the people that get you to 2 million aren't going to be the people that get you to 10 million and aren't going to get the people to 50
Really?
million. Most likely not the workers,
Okay,
but
most likely not. Okay.
the
Okay.
leadership. And so you
Okay.
as the leader of the organization, the founder of the
Yes.
organization, have to realize that. It doesn't mean that you have to exit them, right? It doesn't mean,
Yes.
it just means you have to find a better role for them. And you're going to have to go out and find people that have that ability to scale the company, been there, done that, could grow new markets or grow international markets. And I think if you don't think that way, you're doing malpractice to the business, but you're
Mhm.
also doing malpractice to your employees because they need a leader that can grow them and
Mhm.
educate them and scale and up level their skill sets. And that's what everybody should do. And that's what
Ooh.
leadership is.
I promise you, I got like 1,000 questions flooding through my mind. Man, ever since I was a kid, my mom said, you ask a lot of questions,
That's
man.
what
I'm very curious. Yo, what you said just flooded me with like 10 questions, but I'm going to take it slow. Whoa. Okay, let me start with the first one. So what is let me try to phrase it from what I wrote down. What is the biggest leadership mistake that you see in hyper growth companies? Like companies that are already growing, but what is their biggest leadership mistake? Is it what you said, or is there something else?
So I think there's a couple. One is what I said. The second one is not on the leadership team, but also in the rank and file, not eliminating your low performers. And I think the low performers are what drags you down as the organization. I think it's not adhering to creating a culture, right?
Okay.
Maniacally managing that and leading that culture and hiring to that culture every day. I think it's sometimes focusing on the shiny object syndrome and then not staying core to the drivers of the business. Wow. But, I think to get your question is, it's all about scale, right? Hyper growth companies. And I think it goes back to looking at the leadership team, looking at your department heads and seeing if they have the skill set, or are they working on up-leveling their skill set to get you to that next level, I do think that that's the number one of the biggest issues.
Okay. I don't know. Do you watch boxing?
No.
Okay. So, but let me just tell you this. You don't have to watch it to understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I understand it.
There's a guy called Joshua. That's the last name I remember. But he had this coach that took him to the level where he won, I think, 1 or 2 Olympic medals.
Okay.
Gold medals, not just bronze. He won it. 1 or 2, I don't remember. But anyway, the guy took him to become world champion, right? And then he lost. When he lost, people were telling him he needed to change the coach. And he did change the coach. So he won again, he won back the title. He won back the world title that he lost.
Okay.
And then he won like 2 more matches, and then he lost. So the question is, how do you know when to let go of those leaders in your executive team to get better leaders? And how do you know not to leave them to wait, even though you're failing, right? Through a failure. How do you know that? I don't know if the question is clear.
No, I got your question. It's a valid
Do you know what
question.
I mean? Yes, please.
So I think the first thing you got to say is, are they hitting their KPIs? Right?
Okay.
Are they hitting your growth drivers? So you can look at metrics. And if they're not hitting them, do they have a clear and coherent plan to get to where they need to go? And if not, or if they don't know how to do it, then you have to assume that they can't. Wow. Second thing is that, let's use your example. The guy that he probably learned boxing from that was the local trainer. Didn't get him to the next level, right? Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but he needed to up level, right? Then when he was on the Olympic team, it wasn't just his coach. It was the nutritionist at the Olympic Village. It was the strength coach at the Olympic Village. It was the endurance coach at the Olympic Village. So he created a team. So to answer your question, sometimes, you have to look at, do I need to add versus subtract? So do I add people to the team, to leaders to the team, to augment where the people need to go? And I think
wisdom right there.
Yeah, and I think that's it, right?
Yeah.
But I'm also a big fan of being loyal. Right. I didn't say you got rid of them. I just said you offset them to something that they were going to be successful at. Right. Yes. Because they got you to this point. And they probably hopefully they have some equity, right? Or some stock. So they want to see the success of the company.
Man, life is so funny, man, because someone I just interviewed talked a little bit about this, but they will disagree with you in that sense, because they were telling me that she's a consultant. So she talks with businesses and helps them elevate or whatever scale. So what she was telling me was that she's noticed that some customers or clients of hers have this loyalty. I don't remember what she called it, loyalty something, where they're too loyal to their customers. So they don't increase the prices.
Well, that's just bad economics.
Okay.
That's just bad economics.
And they don't want to, no matter what she tells them, she's like, you have to increase the price. If they go, they go.
Yeah.
You get
there's
another
the old
client.
analogy, right? You raise your prices by 10%, you're only going to lose X% of your customers, and you're going to net out positive, right? So one is the economics of it.
Okay.
Two is, there's your raw materials more expensive, your labor cost is more expensive, your cost of debt is more expensive, so you have to raise your prices.
You have to raise your prices. There's no loyalty to that point. But what you're talking about is a loyalty to building the business.
Yeah,
there's a level of it. Okay.
Somebody was next to you the entire way of going, and you elevated their title. One is shame on you, right? I agree, actually. But I'm just saying is don't kick him or her to the curb.
Yeah,
find a location, find a spot for them.
Man, and it will not. You're saying that this would not affect the business in the long term.
I think by getting them out of the role that maybe they're not skilled at will affect the business in the long term for the
positively.
Yes.
Yeah. And sometimes, how humans are, they're very sensitive sometimes. That could cause a rift.
It could. It's got to be done elegantly. It's got to be done right, and it's got to be done elegantly. Right.
I mean, how I see it is you do what you got to do, man.
Well, you're as a business owner, you do what you got to do.
Yeah, you do what you got to do.
Yeah.
What can you do? You remain at a mediocre level because someone is going to be offended.
No.
You want them to be fed, but they don't have what it takes to get to you to the next level. Bro, I feel like you should get rid of me. If I'm the one in the way, get rid of me. I am not that sensitive. You know what I mean? But everybody's not like us in that term,
Maybe that's good.
Yeah, especially salespeople, they don't have much emotions on that area. You get rid of me, you get rid of me, fine. We're moving on. The last question would be 2 things you would tell your younger self. 1 is something you want them to do, and 2 is something you don't want them to do. Never do this. And then the other one is, I need you to do this. What would those 2 things be?
So what I want them to know is always follow what your heart and head is telling you, right? Because God is probably putting it there. So you got to do it. And even though it's scary, you're going to figure out a way, right? If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. So that's what. The other thing is don't ever do, and I think I alluded to in the beginning, is when things are going well, never take your foot off the gas. Keep on growing.
That's a good one.
Keep on pushing because it's easy to kind of slack. So the one thing, now what was the final one that I needed to answer?
You basically answered both of them. The only thing I wanted you to be more specific with the first one, but it's cool. It's cool. Okay. I just wanted you to say something you want them to do, and you said it. Yeah. And then something you didn't, you were telling them not to do. Don't do this. Right. But you said both of them. You just weren't as specific on the first one. You said you want them to think, follow their heart.
Oh, yeah. Well, so I think, listen, we all go to, we all know that we all have a calling, and sometimes we're in the wrong calling. And so find your calling and find how you could give back. Okay. Celebrate your gifts.
Celebrate your gifts. Okay, there you go. Because I agree with that. Most people don't even know what I
know, right? And sometimes we should know. And I think we've done I think in the past we did a much better job than we do now.
Man, there you go. I agree with you. Actually, it's like I'm an old soul, man, in a young body. Yeah, so last thing would be just give us a word of advice or encouragement. It doesn't have to be business related. It doesn't have to be sales related. Whatever you feel in your heart that can benefit our guests today. So our audience, sorry.
Listen to all of Greg Acuto's interviews. So that's number 1, right? Because there's golden wisdom in all these episodes. So go back and listen to them.
Wow.
But the other thing too is don't listen to them passively. Listen to them actively, because every person that he's had on has given some level of advice and things to do. Implement them, because you spent 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour listening, but take the action that needs to happen. And I think we as humans tend to be really good note takers, but really bad action takers. And notes are important, but take the action. Right. But go back and listen to all of his episodes and implement all the good stuff that we shared.
And how can we find you?
Well, I'm easy, right? So go to salesperformanceteam.com. You can hit me up on the socials. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, Nicholas Loise. on X. You could find me. You could, if they want, we give away our free book, right? So they could get an ebook. They could get a lot of good stuff if they go to salesperformanceteam.com.
There you go, guys. Hey, if you have any questions, feel free to comment below, but feel free to reach out to Nick at salesperformanceteam.com, or you can call him at, can I give you the number?
Go ahead. Yeah,
okay. Just making sure that I don't want someone to be blasting you if they don't need to, But you could call Nick at 847-4. And I'm going to put everything on when we're editing the video, I'm going to put everything on the screen so you guys can see it. And Nick, you've written some books. Is there any particular one you want us to talk, shine light on?
Anyone they see. Yeah, they're all good.
Okay.
If they want a free copy, just tell them to hit me up.
Okay. And do you have any on Amazon?
Yeah, they're all on Amazon too. So they get hit.
Okay.
Yeah, they get hit all on. But if they want free copies, for your guests, we'll mail it to them.
Oh, man. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, not a problem.
Well, we've come to the end of the show today, guys. Thank you, Nick, for joining us. Guys, again, feel free to like, share, follow, comment on all social media. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, and we're on TikTok too. So yeah, I'll see you guys on the next video. Now, welcome to the Equity Experience. Bye now.